Thank you. I am so excited to be here today and to talk to you guys a little bit about Society of Grownups. But most importantly, I'm really excited to talk about something that we don't normally talk about. So let's just get it out there. The money conversation is a very awkward conversation. How many of you would feel maybe a little uncomfortable talking to your friends about your credit score? Yeah, I totally hear you. And how many of you might feel maybe a little judged by talking about how much debt you have with your family? There's some people raising their hands, some people just uncomfortably touching their ears. I see what you're doing. So the money conversation is awkward, and it's awkward for a lot of different reasons. But the truth is that that awkwardness or those attitudes around money, they start really early on. Those roots are really deep. And I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I came to the United States when I was just shy of my second birthday with my parents in the early 80s. And my dad made $13,000 a year as a postdoc. So there were three of us living on that, and even in 1982, that was not a lot of money. And money was something that was so top of mind for my family, yet we never talked about it. Never. In fact, we speak 3 languages in my home. We speak Bengali, English, and Russian. But Russian plays a very specific role. When my parents spoke in Russian at the dinner table, it meant one of 2 things. Either I was in trouble, or they were talking about money. So I started to understand that money was secretive, that it was something that was impolite, that it was something that was not openly discussed. And those attitudes actually persisted throughout my life. I have a group of friends from college, and we have gone through adulthood all together for the last 17, 18 years. And we have talked about everything. Religious leanings, political musings, every single bit of everyone's dating history. And in fact, now we're in the phase where we're oversharing about health. But we still have never had an open conversation about finances or about money. And we're not alone. The Society of Grownups actually ran a survey with 1,000 people between the ages of 21 and 45. And this is what we found. That when it comes to this age group's relationship with money, 2/3 of them would rather tell you who they were voting for in this presidential election than actually talk about it. And 1/3 of them don't even feel comfortable enough to talk to their closest friends. In fact, even at age 25, the conversation just never gets started. And 25 is when things start to get real. So if knowledge is power, what are we leaving on the table by not having this conversation? So IDEO and MassMutual got together over 3 years ago and said, okay, what is this next big opportunity? And what they recognized is that there's 75.1 million millennials in the United States today. They are the largest working population. They just outpace the baby boomers. And if they don't have a place to go and get educated and start to talk about this, it's not just a small problem. It's a matter of national magnitude. And so that is where the whole idea for the Society of Grownups actually came about. So what's really at stake here? In that yellow line, that's credit card debt. And that orange line, that's student loan debt. The class of 2016 is graduating with over $35,000 in student loan debt. And you can see that the slope of both of those debt curves is pretty steep. And you know what the red line is? That's the rate of wages going up. So if there's any group that is getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed as they enter adulthood, this is the one. And this does not just have ramifications for the next 5 to 10 years. This has ramifications for the next 20 to 30. Because if they can't figure out how to manage their short-term goals and their long-term priorities, we have a huge problem on our hands. The Society of Grownups, we founded it and opened in October of 2014. And I'm going to show you a short video that talks a little bit about what we do. So it looks a little different, maybe you noticed. The Society of Grownups, we offer a couple of different offerings. So first of all, we hold classes, chats, and supper clubs. So our classes are capped at about 12 people, our chats are about 10 people, and we did that purposely. We wanted to make sure that we created an intimate environment so people would feel comfortable having this conversation. And we didn't just choose a curriculum that was strictly financial. We don't just talk about the basics of investing or our home buying series. We talk about things like how to travel on a budget and how to live life on your own terms. In fact, our supper clubs are actually classes held over a catered dinner, many times with some wine, which definitely helps to get that conversation going. And our chats are really much more casual. We also offer 2 flavors of financial planning. We offer 20-minute checkups and 90-minute appointments. And the role of those 2 things is actually extremely distinct. The 20-minute checkup is to be able to come in and ask one specific question or to prioritize a list of competing priorities. And the 90-minute appointment is much more in-depth. But our most important goal is to make sure that we kept our offering accessible to the group that we want to serve. So you'll never pay more than $40 a seat for any of our supper clubs, classes, or chats. A 20-minute appointment is $20, and a 90-minute session is $100. And we've done all of that because we recognize that we would completely lose what it was that we were actually trying to do if we did more than that. My own personal favorite is Getting Better with Age. It's a supper club where it's actually co-taught between a certified financial planner and a sommelier. And they talk about how retirement investments get better with age and how wine gets better with age and how to diversify your portfolio and how to diversify your palate. And who would have thought that talking about retirement could be so fun? And so we have recognized that we want to see grown-ups holistically. It's not just about dollars and cents and how much they have in their accounts. We don't take assets under management. What we do is we see them for who they are and help them to understand their own values when it comes to money. Because when it comes to these personal decisions, we recognize that there's a very, very strong financial underpinning. So let's talk a little bit about who we've been able to engage and who these grown-ups are. Our average age is 30 years old, so there's actually 2 bumps in our distribution, one in the late 20s and one in the early 30s. 60% of them are in relationships and married and partnered. 82% of them do not have children. So I want you to think about what's going to be happening for these people in the next 10 to 15 years. And 70% of them rent their home or apartment. So the Society of Grownups is located in Boston, Massachusetts. And in our neighborhood, if you want to buy a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo, that will cost you $550,000. So when people are putting money aside, they have to put serious amounts of money aside. And this goes back to the squeeze. This is why they are delaying getting married. This is why they're delaying having children. This is why they're delaying buying a home. And this is how we've been able to start to gain traction. Since we opened our doors, we've had over 1,500 of our class seats filled, 602 financial appointments, supper clubs. But here's the piece that's most important. These numbers may look small, but we are one small learning initiative located in Boston. But we're beginning to see the beginning of a network effect. People are coming in. They're trusting the experience. They're falling in love with the brand. And they're telling other people about us. They're telling their coworkers and they're telling their friends, you've got to check this place out. And that is one of the most gratifying parts of what it is that we do. I'm going to share a few stories with you. This first one, there's a woman, and she came in to see us, and she's in her early 30s. And she's always felt like she's been dragged around by the nose when it comes to her finances. And what she said to us was, she said, I've tried a lot of different things to actually get my finances together and save for things that are important in my life. And this is the first time that I have felt so accomplished in so little time and feel like I can actually follow through and do this. Exclamation point. That is someone who has been able to find agency. And as you've heard already, these movements and these conversations, they start one person at a time. The second story I'll share with you is about a couple that came in, and they're expecting. And what we noticed was that they were putting every spare dollar into this fund called the house fund. And as we actually started the discovery process, what we started to recognize was this. They actually didn't want to buy a house. They felt like they needed to. They love living the urban lifestyle. They love walking to work. They love their local coffee shop. They love passing by the park, but they can't afford to buy in the city. And when we had the conversation with them and said, you know what, it's not a financially irresponsible decision for you to continue to rent on a long-term basis, that was freeing, because then they were allowed to live life on their own terms. And then the third story is really about the role that money plays in the most intimate of relationships. We had a young woman who has just recently engaged, and she had talked to her fiancé about everything. They had talked about the kind of house they wanted to live in and careers, and they had named their future children, and they knew what schools those future children were going to go to. But they had never had a single conversation about money. And she said, I don't care how much money he makes. I don't even care how much student loan debt he's bringing into the relationship. But what I don't want is I don't want to feel like there's something that's off the table that we can't talk about. And so we talked to her about how to actually have that conversation with him. I share that with you because those are some of the most gratifying pieces to what it is we do at the Society of Grownups. But we have also not gotten everything right. When you're trying to disrupt an industry, when you're trying to change the conversation and build community around a taboo topic, you will absolutely make mistakes. And I'm going to share a couple of those with you. So as I mentioned, when we opened in October of 2014, we were very intentional. We opened our physical location and a digital platform concurrently because we understood that there's a strong synergistic relationship between these two pieces. We can use one to inform the other and vice versa. But what we didn't recognize was this, that our grown-ups would come into the physical space and have an amazing experience and expect that everything they did in the physical space, they would be able to do it online as well. And that is why we've just released our very first beta of SOG Mobile, and we are working hard to be able to bring this to national scale. But that's not something that we understood when we first opened. The other piece is that we were heavily anchored in the way that financial planning has always been done, which is you give someone a whole bunch of information, it goes into a black box, usually a very smart algorithm, and then your life plan comes out on the other side. And as we continue to do user testing and use design thinking principles, this is what we discovered. That people actually want to give you a little bit of information. And then they want to get a little bit of value back. And they want to give you a little bit more information and get a little bit more value back. And by the way, they want to learn how to solve for their own goal constraints. They don't want you to do it for them. And they're much more willing to take action when they've played a very, very active role in figuring out what their priorities are and what they can afford. And it is those learnings that are driving what we're building digitally and what we're doing in our space. So you're probably wondering what's in our future. We have always made sure that our grown-ups are front and center. Our mission is clear. We are democratizing financial literacy. And we're doing this in a way that is powerful and important, but we have even more opportunity to be able to do this in a way that is financially self-sustaining. And so we recognize that by being able to actually build on a platform of trust, well, that's a huge privilege. And we have to make sure that we don't do anything to actually endanger that trust. But we also have to keep our lights on. And so we've come up with a three-pronged approach towards financial self-sustainability. The first one, educational partnerships. We recognize the fact that colleges and universities, well, they're under tremendous pressure to be able to educate this next generation of people and make sure that they understand something about their financial lives. So the Society of Grownups can come in and actually build that kind of a curriculum in partnership with that educational institution. The second piece is around corporate partnerships. So we all recognize that there is a very, very strong race for millennial talent. It's hard to attract them, it's hard to retain them, and it's hard to grow them. But by helping them to understand how the benefits of your company is actually compelling and important to them, we can help along that journey. And the third piece is product partnerships. So one thing that we continue to hear consistently from our grown-ups is this: I get it. I'm supposed to do this thing, like have an emergency fund. Please tell me what I am supposed to do. What bank should I go to in order to open that savings account? How do I start to take action? And that is actually what happens in our physical space today. We do act as a fiduciary, so in the best interest of our consumer. So we're going to be translating that over into our digital platform as well. So our future is looking bright, and this need could not be more important. What I would tell you is this: if you were one of those people that started this session kind of half holding your hand up about feeling awkward around this conversation, I encourage you to just find a way to start it. There is simply too much at stake not to. Thank you.